Good evening and welcome to the July 13th regular meeting of the Garrison Union Free School District Board of Education. Our first agenda item, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you join me over here. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first presentation tonight is an update on one of our important district priorities in the social emotional learning. Laura, if you would sort of set the table for us, introduce the speakers, and then have at it, guys.
Absolutely, and actually John is going to frame it, but John, Marjorie, Matthew Evans, and Debbie Earle have been working on learning, researching, informing themselves around PBIS. Just used an acronym, but they will give you every detail for all of that, and educating themselves about it so that we can implement it district-wide. So they're doing all of the background work and then strategically rolling it out to the rest of the staff and the school community. So, John, you want to frame it?
Sure, I would love to. Thank you very much. It's great to be here this evening. During the course of this year, at various board meetings, we've been hearing about each of the district priorities. Just to harken back, Nancy Romano and her team presented an overview of a lot of the things that have been happening in the realm of technology. There were a number of teachers that talked about everything we're doing with reading and writing and the units of study. And here we have the third and final presentation about social emotional learning. Just for your own information, the good work of the faculty have taken basically the work that's been accomplished in those three realms and formed what we are calling our building success plan. And you should have that in your information this evening, which is basically a way of documenting for all posterity the accomplishments that have happened in each of those three priority areas through the course of this year, and then deciding what are the next consequential action items that should occur during the next school year. So I hope you'll take a look at that. And tonight it's all about social emotional learning. I'd like to just introduce the team that is here this evening. And one member that couldn't be here, Matt Evans, we know as a teacher's aide extraordinaire here in the district, who actually has been our project lead in the area of social emotional learning, specifically PBIS, an acronym which we will soon be describing to you. Debbie Earle and Marjorie Giuliano, two of our classroom teachers. Mike Williams and Jessica Van Decker, our social emotional team, and I've been very, very privileged to be a part of this amazing, amazing team. So what we are doing tonight is basically presenting things from the start, the genesis of being part of a PBIS team. PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports. And there's a certain premise to PBIS, and that is the teaching of behaviors are going to have certain outcomes. So the behaviors that we've been honing in on as a team is to be safe, to be respectful, and to be responsible. And what we hope to achieve is that if we foster a learning environment where these are taught explicitly and celebrated, that we're going to achieve certain very, very ambitious student outcomes. That if we teach students how to be safe, respectful, responsible, we are going to have a student body that thrives socially and emotionally. That if they are able to thrive socially and emotionally, they are going to be more inclined to take risks in learning, a very, very important learning disposition. When they do so, they will become more independent, critical thinkers, and by doing so, they'll achieve higher academically. So that is a hierarchical list of what we hope to be the outcomes of basically the initiative that we're undergoing in social emotional learning. So just to go back and do a brief history of how we have come to this evening. It started with your work in terms of launching a process for identifying district priorities. When social emotional learning was identified by the district as a priority, we put a preliminary team in place that started to look at some of the attributes in the social and emotional realm that Garrison was experiencing. And some of the things we found was that we had some challenges that we were facing. We had an influx in students leaving the district to go into private placements. We also had some students that were going into private placements more from a special education realm because they needed services outside of what we were able to provide for them here in the district. There was not a cohesive practice on how to deal with discipline and why discipline would happen and what would be the process for triggering a discipline referral. And basically also noticed that we needed some improvement just in terms of basic social skills within our student body. That there were certain, what we think are just common courtesies that needed bolstering, quite frankly. So we identified those practices that we had in place in social learning and tried to then fill in the gaps to put what we thought would be a comprehensive way of approaching social emotional learning, with the desired goals as follows: that by concentrating a concerted effort in social emotional learning, we'd be able to manage students' behaviors within the district and keep our students here in our school. That we would be able to increase students' time in the classroom and increase the level of academic engagement for all students. And we would be able to build some best practices in terms of our toolkit of social and emotional skills. And basically that toolkit is what this presentation is going to be about. But before we do, this is new work. This is work that is still in its genesis. It's just beginning. But already we want to celebrate some of the outcomes that we've already seen. One of the things that we've already seen is a significant decrease, sorry for the misspelling there, in classroom evacuations due to physically aggressive behavior towards self, others, and the environment. We had some loss of instructional time because if there was a significant behavior outburst, the protocol is not to do anything but to remove the rest of the class from that classroom to ensure the safety of the student who is in crisis along with the rest of the student body. It's almost been eliminated entirely. We have had a decrease in disruptive behavior. We have had a decrease in homework refusal behaviors, and we have had an increase in students independently exhibiting mindful behaviors, which is something we'll define and talk a little bit about later in the presentation. So how are we doing that? We're doing that by thinking about all the different aspects that exist when we talk about social emotional learning. Social emotional learning is a buzzword right now. It is something that is actually now being mandated by the state ed department. There is a set expectation that Albany is putting upon all public school districts to have a focus in this. So your prioritizing it a year ago was actually ahead of a curve, got us ahead of a mandate, and put us in a very, very good place to be able to deal with the expectations that are coming down from Albany. So, but what is not clear is what are all the realms that comprise social and emotional learning. And this is where this team has done an amazing job taking a look at our toolkit, what we have in place, what we don't have in place, and basically putting together 6 different areas that really then fully encompass what we feel is the Garrison's approach to social emotional learning. And this will be, as I said, these 6 toolkits will comprise our presentation for the rest of the evening. We'll be done talking and you'll hear from the experts in just a moment. But let me just introduce these to you and sort of help you to see how they really complete one large puzzle for our kids. TCIS stands for Therapeutic Crisis Intervention Supports. It basically is saying that you are going to, in any school population, have some very serious behavioral needs. Also, any child can be triggered and have severe behavioral needs that are situational to a time and a place. And us recognizing those behaviors, stopping them before they reach to a crisis is a goal, and we're being given training and ways to do that. And certainly if we're not able to prevent a crisis, how we cope with the crisis and how we educate a child after the crisis to become reflective and go through a process where it becomes learning. PBIS stands for, as I said, Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports. Basically a system that says in order to have a healthy social or emotional school, we have to define what the behaviors are, what those behaviors, what the behavioral expectations are, how they look in all the different places in the school, because the expectations might be very, very different from a science room to a gymnasium. How do we teach them? How do we encourage them and celebrate them when they're happening? How do we keep data that tracks when they're not happening and have a targeted system that really goes into remediation and reteaching of behaviors when it's needed by students? Mindfulness. How do we provide students with the ability to recognize their own need to self-regulate? That we have triggers within our brain and within our emotional framework that could lead to bad things if we do not learn how to self-regulate our emotions and calm ourselves so that we could best handle any social emotional situation. Responsive classroom, which is an approach that is new to our district that Marjorie Giuliano in 2nd grade is really bringing to us and starting to communicate more and more, which is how you build culture within a classroom, how you build a community where learning is entwined with treating each other as community members, where respect and tending to the well-being of others is just part of the expectations of the community. Character education, how we use the skills of our social emotional team to really targetedly teach a curriculum of behaviors and how we treat each other. And lastly, our homework room, where we're realizing, even though this seems to cross from the social emotional realm over into the academic realm, understanding that a lot of the homework situations, when it's not being done, are tied to social emotional situations at home, and giving those students supports, giving them encouragement, and giving them a safe place to be able to not only complete their tasks, but have some friendly adults to help to mentor them, is certainly why we're including it as part of the social emotional education. That being said, I'll stop talking and let you learn a little bit about all of these 6 tools, starting with therapeutic crisis intervention supports and Marjorie Giuliano.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to first talk to you all about therapeutic crisis interventions and supports. We call it TCIS. So just so that you get a background of where it came from, well, how it came to come here. Me being the 2nd grade teacher, the year prior, that class had experienced a lot of classroom evacuations. And from the beginning of the school year, I saw that was happening. So I reached out to admin for support. And I told them that this was unsustainable and I need something. Even with my background in teaching and responsive classroom, what I was doing was not enough. So I needed training, the adults in my classroom needed training, and admin jumped on it. We got the training, and one of the big things about TCIS is that they press that you don't look at the behavior, because that's just the tip of the iceberg, that there's so much more going on with the feelings and the needs of the child. And knowing that, you will approach the child in crisis differently. TCIS is very proactive. Our goal as educators is to try to get ahead of the crisis before it happens. So there's so much that goes into knowing the background of our students, so much put into knowing triggers and all of those things so that we can proactively support our student before a crisis occurs. Let's say a child is in crisis, TCIS also teaches us how to support the child and de-escalate the situation. One of the first questions you ask yourself before you approach a child in crisis is, how do I feel? How powerful is that? How do I feel before I try to support this child? If I am nervous, if I am scared, then I'm probably not the one to approach this child. But it also stops you in your tracks. If I'm feeling scared or nervous, then I need to stop and reflect, calm myself, and then come to that child. and use all the steps in TCIS to give that child support. Then TCIS takes it to the next step. Once you have de-escalated that child, you go back and you do something called a life-based interview with that student. And you talk to them about what happened, and then you give them strategies on how they can deal with situations before it gets to that point. You're giving them not only that skill for school, but that skill is for life. And for all of us who went to this training, we all had this amazing aha moment. You were able to reflect back and think, how often have we accidentally engaged in a power struggle with a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old? And as adults, we know we will never win in a power struggle with a child. So, as they're setting up,
This would have been useful though.
we have a skit, but before they start the skit on a power struggle, I just want to show you this diagram. And the diagram first talks about, oops, back, it's so sensitive. I didn't even touch it. Okay, so first part is the student experiencing a stressful situation or an incident, and then the student has these internal feelings, but the feelings are manifested through some type of behavior. Then this is the big one. How does the adult respond to that behavior? And depending on how the adult responds, will decide whether or not we are engaging in a power struggle. Because as you see, it's going to get stressful, students' feelings, behavior, and so on. Ready? Action.
I would maybe put your chair over there only because then everybody can see you. So just put it like way back so that they can see you. Oh, thank you.
I thought that was part of the
And you're
story.
gonna
That's right, we're really at the moment here. I don't want the chair to.
Actors
A little obsessive.
All right, just want to make sure everybody sees that he's brilliant. You don't want to miss it.
Ready and action.
All right, guys, we know exactly what's got to get done this period. There's finals that you have to study for. There are assignments that are due before the end of the semester. I expect everyone focused. I expect us getting to work. So let's buckle down. Less talking, more working. Let's go. Mike, your book's on the floor. Let's go. Pick it up. Let's get to work.
All right.
Clearly it's not all right. Your book's still on the floor. Let's go. Mike, pick
I
up the
heard
book.
you.
You didn't hear me because the book's still on the floor. Pick it up, Mike. Mike, let's
All
go.
right.
It's not all right. Pick up the book,
You pick
Mike.
it up. Why don't you pick on them?
Mike,
They don't pick up
the
their
book.
books.
Mike,
Fine.
let's go.
Here.
Open the.
There's the book.
Now we're throwing things. Mike,
keep
pick up the
yelling
book.
at me, so-
Pick up the book.
You pick
You
up
have
the
3
book.
seconds,
Oh,
Mike.
3 seconds?
2,
What?
1.
What are you gonna
Let's go.
By the way, that's middle school students.
So that was an example of a power struggle. Now you're going to see how
So we don't
the
do
adult, how the adult's response helps to stop the power struggle.
All right, we know exactly what's got to get done this period. We have finals to study for. We have assignments that are due before the end of the semester. So let's get to work. More working, less talking. Let's go. Mike, let's get to work. You have work to do.
Hey.
Let's get to work, Mike. Mike, we're still not getting to work, bud. I know you know, but we gotta get something done this
I
period.
can't, I'm not ready to work right now.
You seem frustrated.
I am frustrated. They don't teach me what they say. I'm supposed to understand it. I don't understand it. They always say, oh, we taught you this, and they didn't actually teach me it. It's so ridiculous. Every day. Oh, you learned this today. You should be able to do the homework. Well, I can't. I don't understand it.
So you sound frustrated and you feel like you're not able to do the work and you're feeling like you weren't taught this.
I wasn't. I can't do the work. That's it.
Well, good news. We have a chance here. We have an opportunity. So we can figure this out. We can work through it. We can learn it now if you felt like you didn't learn it then. We have an entire period, let's see what we can
You're
get.
not a social studies teacher.
Well, we can figure it out together. You were there, I got some type of knowledge, and maybe together we can figure out what's going on. And get something done this period. May not be everything, but we'll make some progress. Alright, let's figure this out. What part was the most confusing?
42.
Alright,
Cut.
let's figure it out.
So in that skit, both skits, you're able to see in the first skit how the adult was really the deciding factor in whether or not they engaged in a power struggle. And in the second skit, you saw how the adult took a step back, gave the student some time, and then approached the student, went down to the student's level, and was able to calmly talk to that student and give that student the proper support.
It's been extremely effective immediately.
PBIS?
Yeah.
So you've heard the acronym, right? You've now given the explanation of what the acronym is, PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. So the number one thing you're always looking for in the classroom, right, is increased instructional time. You're always looking to make as much time out of the day as possible. You're looking to take every single minute you have to make sure you're instilling as much knowledge into those kids as humanly possible. That is the most attractive thing about PBIS. That's what's inherent in PBIS, is that increased instructional time. How? Because of the tenets of PBIS, you have the opportunity to increase your instructional time because there's less time you're spending in correcting those negative behaviors in the classroom. So oftentimes you have programs that are geared towards this type of student. So, you know, you may have an issue with behavior with this child, or a program for somebody who may be acting this way. The best part about PBIS is that it's universal, and it's impactful for every single child, no matter who they are. That's that tier 1 of PBIS. Again, it's universal. It means every single child, no matter what. There are different tiers, from tier 2, which will then go into smaller groups of children, and then tier 3, which is more targeted individually. But at the end of the day, no matter who that child is, every single child is touched by those tier 1 initiatives of PBIS. No matter where they're coming from, there's something there that's going to work for them. Oftentimes, in the educational culture, it's the flavor of the month, right? So one person comes in, here comes another initiative. This person comes in, here comes another thing. This commissioner comes in, here's what they're gonna do. Everything continuously and constantly is changing. And on a staff, sometimes it's like, oh, well, you know what? This isn't gonna last very long, so when this person's gone, here comes the next thing. With PBIS, inherently, it's staff-driven, it's staff-built, it's staff-crafted, it's staff-created, it's staff-motivated. As a result, because it's not coming from the top down, there's this inherent excitement and ownership of the entire process from beginning to end, right? So when we were coming up with what it is we were looking to do with PBIS, it was the staff that were surveyed from the very beginning and were asked, you know, what are the areas that we need to focus on in the building? What are your expectations for your classroom? What are your expectations for the cafeteria? What are you noticing that our children need in terms of behavior? What is it that we need to be teaching them? These were things that the staff wanted. They were looking for that level of support. And how do we do this? How do we achieve that? How do we get to that point? Well, now that they have this program that they're owning, there's an inherent need and desire to see it succeed. And because of their initiative and because of their investment, that's what makes PBIS sustainable throughout time. And it's not an intervention. And it's a framework. That's a word that needs to continuously and constantly be associated with PBIS, is framework. Why? PBIS gives you the foundation. I want you to think about this in terms of a house. No matter where we live, our foundation is the same. What it's built on is going to be very similar across the board. But how you build it looks completely different. So how my house looks on the outside is going to be different from how your house looks like on the outside. How you furnish it on the inside is going to be completely different depending upon what your needs, your wants, your desires are, and what that outcome you want to see for your house. That is PBIS. It gives you the foundation to succeed. But at the end of the day, what does safe, responsible, and respectful look like in the Garrison community? What does it mean for us here? That's the key thing about this. You shape it to fit your needs. It is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So oftentimes when you're looking at TCIS, it works, it is effective, but we're going to teach it here the same way they're going to teach it everywhere. But PBIS, you can walk into any school district in any building in this entire county that utilizes PBIS, and none of it will look the same, because it's about what works for them. And we're talking about clear expectations. PBIS is all about language. Oftentimes, and it's just habit, and it's just the way we operate as individuals, don't do this, don't do that. How often have we said to a child, hey, don't run? Well, they stop running, and they start skipping instead, right? So we didn't tell them what it is we wanted to see. We told them what we didn't want them to do. We never set that expectation of this is what this behavior looks like in this setting. That's what PBIS does. And this is where that universal tier 1 aspect of it comes into play. Because we're talking about what does being safe and respectful look like in the cafeteria as opposed to the gym, as opposed to the classroom. Well, being safe in the gym might involve running. But are we running in the classroom? Is that safe? Is that responsible? So it's making sure that we're establishing these clear expectations by telling students, this is what we want to see. You're eliminating that wiggle room that oftentimes students will attempt to find. And we're giving them exactly what you want to see. And that 4-to-1 ratio. It's about ensuring that you're properly giving the focus to the P in PBIS, positive. So every single time that you need to address a child's behavior when they're not meeting expectations, you want to follow that up at least 4 times by making sure that child notices that you do see when they are meeting the expectations of that setting, when they are making sure that they're doing what needs to be done. So if I say, Mike, we're not looking ready to learn right now, we're not really meeting our expectations of the classroom. Mike takes his book out, puts it on his desk. Mike, I love seeing that you have your book out on your desk. I see that you're ready to learn. That's being responsible in our classroom. Mike, I appreciate the way that you're walking in this hallway. You're meeting the expectations of the hallway. Thank you very much. You're following it 4 times, making sure that that child knows, wait, I'm getting that attention. I'm getting that positive feedback for doing what I'm supposed to do, and making sure that it's that 4-to-1 ratio. So it's not about ignoring when expectations aren't being met. It's not about ignoring, for lack of a better term, negative behavior. But it's about when you do address that negative behavior, that you're following it up, and not equally, but in greater amounts to that positive language. And it's got to be behavior specific. Notice that conversation with Mike. I didn't say I'm really glad to see that you're meeting expectations. Well, how would Mike have known what expectation he was meeting? If I want Mike to repeat that behavior, he needs to know exactly what that behavior was that I was happy to see. That's why specifically it's, I like that that book was out on your desk and that you're ready to learn. You're showing you're being responsible in this classroom. That is PBIS. So, Marjorie, what does it look like to be responsible in the bathroom?
Use restroom closest to your classroom. Walk directly back to class after using the restroom.
John, what does it mean to be respectful on the bus?
Let me get up and put my glasses on. Respectful on the bus means that I'm going to use the appropriate language. I'm going to use a calm, low voice and keep my hands and feet to myself and greet the bus driver.
Thank you very much. And Mike, what does it mean to be responsible on the playground?
Line up quickly and clean up my recess equipment.
So what you notice in all of those, it's not the same. It's not the same. And what we wanted to make sure we did is that every single teacher was involved in the process of making sure that the art room, the gym, the music room, all of them had different expectations. So we literally had an entire room of large post-its all on the walls. And the teachers are going around with markers and marking what each one means to them and how. And the conversations that you saw happening where they were like, well, yeah, but for me in the art room, I want to make sure that they understand that this is what is expected because I'm working with these tools and those tools. And it was making sure that every single person had a say, and it helped us as colleagues understand, you know what, it may be a little different in that setting. And it's making sure that we're teaching those students that when you're here, these are the expectations. When you're there, those are the expectations. Believe it or not, we teach this all the time and not even realizing it. How often do we say that, and when we go into the store, I expect that you act X, Y, and Z. We're doing it all the time. We just have to make sure that even in a school setting, they understand that when you're here, this is what's expected. When you're there, that's what's expected. Mindful or mindful I will now turn it over to my distinguished colleague, Mike Williams.
Thank you. Okay, I did present on some mindfulness last year, so I'll give you an update, and I hope not to take too much of your time. I think we've built more capacity this year in mindfulness. I think every student from K through 7 can tell you what the amygdala is. The amygdala is the alarm part of your brain. It's the smallest part of your brain that makes the most noise. Your amygdala is there because there's a bear in the woods and it's an alarm. It's I better run. But your amygdala is not there when somebody cuts you in line in front of the water fountain, and you get very angry and upset and irate, and now you're going back to class and you can't learn because your prefrontal cortex is what we tell them, it's smoky. And how do you get rid of smoke? You blow on it, you breathe. So we do a lot of belly breathing. We do a lot of exercises that have to do with breathing. Mrs. Van Decker, Jessica, and I have been working in, we went to BOCES last year for some training. We've done some in-house training, both with each other, with a scholastic curriculum called Mind Up, which is excellent because for me, I know we might have spoken about it last year. When I first heard about mindfulness, I was a little worried. Is this like a religion? Is this Buddhism? What is this? Is this yoga? It's none of those things. It's really just being in the present moment, being able to clear your thoughts, or at least acknowledge your thoughts are there, and being able to carry on with your day. I have been working this year with 4th through 7th grade, 4th through 8th grade, and Jessica has been working K1, 2, 3. We did last year train some teachers, so I know Mrs. D'Onofrio uses it in her classroom, Mr. Caliendo uses it in his classroom, Mrs. Waters has used it. I certainly use it in one-to-one counseling, sometimes in group settings. I'm sure Jessica has. And I've definitely seen the benefit. I'm thinking right now of a particular 7th grade student who in the 6th grade was referred to Mr. Griffith's office, let's say a dozen times throughout the entire school year. And the remedy for that was that his parents would have to pick him up after school if he were to be sent to the office. It still didn't really work. He wasn't able to navigate that. We tried a lot of different tools to put into place. And this year, because he was in my Mind Up curriculum last year, which we did 1 minute of mindfulness every morning with the 6th grade, I think that really benefited this student because this year, right before he's going to escalate, he has said to me on numerous occasions, I was able to step back, take a breath, go get a drink of water, use the tools that he learned through that 1 minute of mindfulness in the morning. So it has proven to be effective. I did share with you the story last year of one of our students who was in a bad skiing accident, had to wait for an ambulance on the top of a mountain, and he turned to me when I went to visit his home and said, I can't believe it, but that stuff that we're doing every morning, it really helped me, you know. So it's been proven effective, and we're happy to continue that trend here at Garrison. Do you have anything about mindfulness, Jess, that you could add for this year in particular?
What do you think I know? No, it's a really easy thing to explain to kids. They like learning about how their brain works. Even the little ones, they like doing the practice. It's fun. We use a lot of glitter jars in the younger grades. They all want one. A lot of them probably have taken them home.
Can you explain what a glitter jar is?
Yeah, so a glitter jar is basically a jar of water with glitter glue in it, but it's like a model of your brain where you teach the children that when it's all shook up, it's when their amygdala's gone off and they can't see through it, it's swirling around, there's a tornado in there, and you just need to wait and it'll settle down and you'll be able to see clearly. The glitter will settle and you'll be able to see through the water again. It's also a timer because it takes a certain amount of time to settle, so it's a timer to sit and watch it while you practice the breathing exercises. It times you. And it's quick, 1 or 2 minutes, and that's literally about the time it takes to go from panic to being calm.
You know, coming back from recess and there's an argument or there's a conflict happening out on the field, it's hot, it's June, it's 85 degrees, the building is warm, the kids come back into the school, how can they possibly be ready to learn in that mind frame? So we're hopeful that by teaching them these tools, somewhat like PBIS, if it's consistent, that they'll start to grab onto those as anchors for themselves and be able to do that, because we don't expect teachers to lead a classroom lesson 7 times a day. Sometimes I know for sure, at one point I went into 2nd grade, you had a sub that day, and the sub came out and said, hey, Mr. Williams, can you help me out? They're a little ramped up. There's something happened at recess. I didn't get into what happened. Let's talk about it. That could be a half an hour, especially with 2nd graders. So I just said, hey, let's just try and do some mindfulness. I know you do mindfulness with Mrs. Van Decker. They were like, yes, okay, get into your mindful bodies. And within 3 or 4 minutes, the whole classroom felt like it was just a different culture. And I was able to leave and say, thank you for your time. And they're like, thanks, Mr. I mean, it was really a big shift, and it was a big shift in 2 or 3 minutes. So, but yes, I would like to see students being able to do it more on their own, because certain students will utilize it more. Certain students are withdrawn to their amygdala alarm, as you know, going off more than others. So I think I have a video of the current 4th grade, and every time I do a character ed lesson, which is twice a month, I start the 4th grade with 1 minute of mindfulness. And sometimes they're like, we want to try 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, you know? And I'm like, well, then we'll never get to our lesson. So they come in, they know zip up their spine, which means sit up tall. They know mouths closed, eyes closed. So after a few lessons, I don't have to tell them what it means to do this. I just say, let's get into our mindful bodies, and I start the timer. So this was right after I started the timer. We'll just look at a clip of this. Oh no. What's happening? This is play.
No, not that way.
Oh. Is there a way to play it? Okay, here
I
it
think
goes.
it's coming up. Yeah. They opened it up, yeah. That's it.
Now, I know all of these students. I know which ones are generally much more active than others. Again, some of them it's you would think it would be easy for, and some of them you would think would be hard for. It's actually very easy for all of them. We'll get a peek here or there. I did tell them, I believe, at this point, yeah, I'm going to just take a quick video of you guys. I wanted to show their teachers, actually. I didn't know we'd be presenting. This is probably back in February. So, you know, you can really get a sense of, once this 1 minute is over, we open our eyes, and I mean, everybody's focus is just like, okay, what are we ready to learn right now? Where are we going? What are we doing today, Mr. Williams, you know? So it has been sort of a fascinating experience for me. I didn't buy into it right away, so I was a little jaded about it, like I said before, and I couldn't tell you enough about it. It's simple, it's easy, and it can be implemented very well school-wide. And Jessica and I have done some training with the teachers. I know I taught a professional development course after school on mindfulness both last year and this year, and I know you did one last year as well. So, and teachers show up, they want to know what it's all about. So hopefully you get a little flavor of that tonight. And that is my spiel. Here's Marjorie.
So responsive classroom is the foundation of my classroom. That's the core of how I'm able to do what I do as a teacher. It's because of responsive classroom. I was formally trained in responsive classroom a few years ago, maybe 8 years ago. It was a 1-week training in the city, and it's been amazing. So the way responsive classroom works is that it puts just as much importance in social emotional development as it does academic growth. It feels that you cannot have one without the other. And it really puts so much emphasis on it that I really focus on establishing my community the first 6 weeks of school. It's huge, and it's just really focused on establishing routines and building a community, getting my students to know and love each other. Because if you love each other, then you're less likely to hurt each other and being kind. And the way you do that is by getting kids to know each other. And responsive classroom's base is the morning meeting. And the morning meeting has 3 main parts. The first part is the greeting, the second part is the share, and the third part is the activity. In the greeting, as the teacher, I could give you an example. One of the greetings we do is called Wink Detective. And for the kids, it's fun, there's a winker, there's a detective. But for me, I'm watching my students greet each other. I model for them that they should be giving each other eye contact, shaking each other's hands, giving each other a smile. But 9 out of 10 times every year, even if I model for them, you'll find students that are quickly running and kind of like shoving off friends that they don't really want to greet and greeting their friends. Then at the end of the greeting, we all sit down at the edge of the rug. And then I ask them, was this greeting successful, unsuccessful, or so-so? And I've been watching the whole time, so I know who greeted who and who didn't and who was not nice. I'm watching them. So I strategically pick students. I pick the student who says it was successful and they explain why. But then I pick that student who's saying it was unsuccessful. And we use no names. And I ask that student, well, why are you saying it was unsuccessful? And that student says, because I went to go greet a friend and they walked away from me. They didn't greet me. And I asked them, well, how did that make you feel? And they said it made me feel bad, sad, embarrassed. So without that other friend having to have their name said in the group, that friend has heard how they made that other student in the classroom feel. So powerful. And I'll talk to them. I'll say, well, what can we do to make it more successful next time? And then they're able to articulate themselves what they will do better next time. Then we come to the share. So here, we have students who are learning how to use their voice, share their personal stories. And I pick students every day, and different students share. They bring things from home, they bring things they made. This is one of my shy students, and she, in the beginning, wasn't really much of a talker, but she volunteered to share. She came into school and she shared this. It was like a toy machine she made with her dad. And if you notice here, in responsive classroom, the expectation is as a teacher, I'm modeling for students the behavior that I expect from them. So that's why you see me sitting on the rug. All the students are giving her attention, giving her eye contact, and then at the end they get to ask her questions. And the big thing about responsive classroom is that it creates a learning environment where children will feel safe enough to take risk in their learning. Because as a teacher, I'm watching their behavior, I'm making sure that they're treating each other kindly, and if I see any behaviors that I feel are inappropriate, or another student feels inappropriate, the students are free to talk it out and explain how they're making each other feel. And the reason why this is so huge, because if students are able to take risks in a safer space, like morning meeting, then they're more comfortable to take a risk during academic instruction, where it's more high stakes for them. Because if they feel that I can make a mistake and I know that no one's going to laugh at me or be unkind, then that's how I get to push my students even more. Here's another image of one of my students sharing one of his favorite books with his classmates, and they're so interested and they're getting questions. And responsive classroom also pushes knowing your students' parents. So I had spoken to Sarah about this, and she had already told me that he's sharing this book and stuff like that. So I was ready to have it projected for him. Thank you.
One of the things we're doing well here at Garrison School that still is not done nearly enough in other schools is our character education program. So I would like to thank you, the board, and I would like to thank the administration for making this a priority, not only as of last year, but since I've been in this school. It has always been important for the school counselor and the school psychologist to push into every single classroom. That builds relationships between kids and adults in the building that in other buildings does not exist. In other buildings, what exists is a psychologist who is testing in a small office all day, only the kids who need to be tested, and a school counselor who is meeting with kids only who have crisis, dilemmas, upset. This is not the culture of our school. In our school, kids walk in and out of my room very freely. Hey, I just want to ask you something. I want to run something by you. I'm worried about high school. My mom's upset. I'm having a fight with my friend. I just took something out of somebody's locker and dropped it into the elevator shaft. You know, all kinds of things, right? But they don't have any reservations about coming in. We have a bully box on both of our I've had this bully box sitting out there for years, and maybe once a year I get a report, because the other 10 reports are kids just coming in and saying, hey, I'm being bothered, you know? So the way that is created is because we are present in the building. Twice a month, K through 5, K through 6, and then more in 7th and 8th grade, because now we have a guidance/health curriculum that I'm teaching. So character ed in the classroom. You know about it very well. Your kids probably talk to you about it. I just said all of this, fosters relationships with students and pupil personnel, very important. I want to ask Mrs. Van Decker to come up and talk about what she just did with the 3rd grade. We hear a lot about bullying. The culture of America has bullying is a hot topic, and you'll see some 7th grade video from last year because they're not done editing this year for mine. But the big thing that we're always trying to impress upon the kids is not everything is bullying, and the parents do. A lot of it is conflict, right? So we always misidentify what is conflict and what is bullying. And when Jessica took over the 3rd grade guidance curriculum for me this year, because I had a heavy caseload in counseling in middle school, we tried to be equal, I said, the conflict versus bullying is huge in 3rd, and then we pushed back into it in 7th. So with that, I'll let Jessica speak for a minute.
Well, in 3rd grade, we did spend a few months talking about conflict, and first we talk about conflict, which is basically a disagreement between 2 equals, 2 peers, where they're both upset. Everybody's upset. Everyone has a reason to be mad. And we talked about numerous strategies to solve your own conflicts, because kind of the push, even from K1-2, is building independence. Mike and I want to see you, but if you can solve your own problem, or you can sit with your unease, or deal with someone who's annoying for any amount of time, that's kind of the goal. So in 3rd grade, I took this on this year. So we did conflict, then we got into bullying, which I taught them is an intentional, harmful, hurtful behavior that the person enjoys it. One person is really upset, and the other person is happy about it. They like it. They do it again. So that's a very specific definition that when someone's like, oh, they're bullying me, it's, they have to be doing it on purpose. They have to mean to be hurting you, and they also have to like it. Which is a pretty strict definition, but we feel at the school really important to differentiate that out. So then this kind of wrapped, and the 3rd, I was like, okay, now what? So years ago, when PBL was the thing, as Matt said, I sat through all these trainings on project-based learning, and okay, so now I have this class,
That's not a thing anymore?
and
Okay.
I said, okay, kids, let's brainstorm your ideas for what are we going to do about all this that we just learned. So one little girl in 3rd grade said, I want to put on a bullying fair. So we did. And she ran it, she helped me organize it, and these are just some of the projects, but basically every 3rd grader had to individually or in a group do a project. We had a lot of skits, we had, this is a board game, we had a game show. These boys are acting out a skit, and we invited the 2nd grade to come watch so they could see. And now they're asking me, when's our bullying? So I guess it's a thing now. But we invited parents, kind of last minute, but I know a lot of you came, and it really was bigger than I thought it would be, but it just showed me like how excited and interested the kids were in developing this on their own. So I was really proud of them. I was really nervous that morning, like, oh my goodness, I have 30 parents showing up, and what are we going to do with it? I feel like they pulled it off, and I was really proud, and the 2nd grade loved it, and it was fun. Is there another there? Of your video.
I don't want you to get the idea that all we do is talk about bullying. In 4th grade, I did a responsibility project this year. I've done it for numerous years. We talk about what it means to be responsible to yourself, to your family, to your friends, and to your community. What is a community? They learn a lot of stuff in character education about different topics. But then that culminates in I hard boil as many eggs as I can for as many students as they are. The students decorate and name their eggs. I got little Chinese food containers, and I get Easter grass, and they carry their egg around for 10 days in the school. And everywhere they go, they have to carry their egg around. If their egg breaks, we don't show upset. We help our friends. I mean, there are all kinds of things. And then it culminates at the end. There's probably, this year there were more kids than ever that had the eggs left over. And so I do prizes, I do lunch bunches, and I do candy. Kids love Starbursts. But this year I had a lot of kids, and we have an egg toss at the end. So the person whose egg doesn't break through an egg toss, they have to choose a friend that they trust. So, okay, you're going to be my partner. Are you ready? Because this is my egg, And it's fantastic. They have a great time. It culminates well. In 5th grade, we just are finishing up what's called a perseverance project. They research a person either that is living now in sports, in science, in theater, in history. We've had Helen Keller, we've had Jackie Robinson this year, we've had some basketball players. I always learn something new about somebody, and they have to find a person in pop culture or in culture in general that has shown perseverance and has had success. What have they come through? And they have a menu of how they can present that. Some people will do a PowerPoint, some people will write a play, and the 5th grade loves that. So I just want to give you a little sense of what we do. In 7th grade, we do these bullying videos. You may have seen this last year. This was sort of the best picture last year. I'm only going to show you a couple of seconds of it because it's longer than that. This year, 7th grade, we changed the schedule. Last year I had them 3 times a week for 1 quarter, which was nice, but this was actually better because I have them only once a cycle, but I have them all year. So I get to see their growth throughout the entire year. But the drawback of that is it takes like 4 months for them to shoot this video. So we don't have that video ready for you tonight, but they're excited. We're going to have a viewing party next week with the entire 7th grade. There's about 6 new videos coming up. So now do I have to forward to the next one with this? I would think. Nope.
Yeah, just click, yeah, click it, yeah.
I teach the kids a little bit about filmmaking beforehand, a little bit about acting, a little bit about filmmaking, taking some of my old experience and talk about over the shoulder and don't cross the line of the camera work. You'll see some of these creative shots that these kids came up with. It's fascinating.
No, I don't. Oh my god, that's such a pretty shirt! That is the ugliest shirt I've ever seen. I don't know, I guess we'll find out. What are you doing? You're my friend, right? Yes. Then you're not going to say it.
There's your best cinematography shot right here.
Are you ready to go? Yeah, let's go. Wait. What was that? I don't know. Maybe it has to do with this note.
Okay. So that is, I can't wait to see the new ones this year. We've been doing it for about 4 years. So that's our character education program. Again, I can't impress upon you how important it is that we are able to have relationships with all the kids in the building. It's really, really wonderful that we're doing that. So thank you for that. Mr. Evans and Matt will talk to you about homework room, which is a little bit of both of our baby here.
Thank you, Mr. Webb.
So this is something that was added for this school year, and it was basically noticed that completing homework assignments in middle school was becoming somewhat of an issue. There were chronic individuals who were avoiding completing their homework assignments. So Mr. Williams approached the idea with the middle school teachers, brought me into the fold for it, and we determined that we were going to create a homework room for students grades 6 through 8. It was a room that they would be able to utilize for during their lunch and recess periods to complete those assignments that they were unable to complete at home. So in that setting, they're provided with the support to ensure that those assignments are completed, with the goal and with the hope of ensuring that they would no longer become chronic homework offenders once it was understood that these assignments needed to be completed regardless. So we began with 13 chronic homework avoiders within the middle school. Now, we know our school population, so we know for 13 grades 6 through 8 to be chronic homework avoiders, we know that's an issue that needed to be addressed. So again, that was the impetus for the homework.
It's a high percentage when you're talking about 70 kids.
Yeah, so those were the amount that were identified in October. By now, we are down to only 2 students who are still, having issues with completing those homework assignments. The success that was built around it through grades 6 through 8 opened the door for grades 4 through 5 to also utilize the homework room to ensure that these students are completing those assignments. So once we were able to add that to the fold as well, you also saw those numbers begin to decrease as well, because again, they were provided with the opportunity to complete those homework assignments with the needed support in order to do that.
Can I just interject another thing that was supported by administration? I have been trying to do this since I arrived here. It's not a new idea, it's not a novel idea, it's just, it works. I've seen it work in other districts when I was in other districts. The issue I had doing it was if I did it, I couldn't do my lunch bunches, which were the social clubs or the divorce groups, so I would do it like once or twice a week. You know, a kid who's chronically missing their homework assignments, it's every day. So even once or twice a week, it couldn't catch up. So this year I went to John and said, hey, you know, I've been doing this, it's not working because I don't have it every day. Can we have a staff member in a room and Matt was so gracious to say, I'll take my lunch 9th period so I can help you 6th period. So every day Matt has been in the room. What's nice about that is I can pop in and pop out. Some of the kids really responded really well to it. Some of the kids were grateful for it. Some of the kids don't have that ability at home for whatever reason or another. So we've created another space for them. So I don't want you to think it's a punishment. For some of them it feels like it and it is, but for some of them it actually just built up habits and it's been a great thing. So again, thank you to the administration because it was very helpful this year.
Is the decrease that the kids are getting the homework done during these periods, or
They don't need the room anymore.
now don't want to spend their lunch or recess in the period, and so they're getting their work done ahead of time, or both?
They're getting the work
Yeah,
done at
yeah,
home more often than not. The 2 kids that are still in there, one is in danger of retention, and the other student is going to be okay and has shown progress, but we wouldn't identify that student as somebody who's out of the room completely. But yes, if they're 11 out of those 13 kids are generally doing their homework at home, and have not needed to be there every day.
And there's a shared Google sheet between, administration, Mr. Williams, myself, and all those middle school teachers. So what it allowed for us to end up having that I didn't expect to have was an additional data point. So if we're seeing that this student is continuously not doing homework in a specific subject, we can now say, okay, is it avoidance for this subject, or is there a certain period that they're avoiding the work for, and so on and so forth. So it would then allow for us to provide those additional added supports whether or not or where it's necessarily needed for that student. So that was a benefit that we were able to see from it. And again, we were able to expand that to 4th and 5th grade, and we were able to see the same success there. And oftentimes the room can be utilized for disciplinary infractions. However, in that respect, what is great about it is it's used as a point for that student to reflect. So when they're in the homework room for that purpose, they have a reflection sheet, which forces them to have a reflection on what the behavior was that led them and what behavior they're going to institute differently going forward to ensure that they're not having issues with that same type of behavior. So the best part about that is there's a conversation that takes place at the conclusion of that reflection sheet, and it's a great conversation that takes place because it really helps that child understand what potentially led to the choices that they made that turned out not to be the wisest decisions at the moment.
And that's just a huge success story. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Question I have is do you have any theories about why the percentage was as high as it is?
Well,
and is there some interaction with parents that needs to happen on that?
And the interaction does happen with parents quite often and somewhat tirelessly. I don't know what it is about the culture. Since I've been here, the number has grown of kids who are sort of homework avoiders and homework refusers, and there's not a lot of consequence. I don't always say at home. Now, there are definitely some families in which what is needed to happen can't be there for whatever reason or another. So we understand and support that in a different way. But then there are just families that maybe don't value it. And then there are some families who maybe don't know how anymore. Here's the moral of the story is when these teachers give you minimal homework in K1-2, we have to, as a community, say it's important to us. It's reinforcing learning. Nobody's giving homework just to give homework, and I've heard this argument back and forth over the years. I promise you that the kids that are in this homework room were not doing their homework in K1-2. And a lot of those kids' parents were arguing that they shouldn't be doing homework. But now what's going to happen is they're going to go to high school, and those high school teachers don't want to hear that nobody believes in homework. So I think the culture shifted 5 or 6 years ago with little kids. I don't know if you would agree.
That's what I was going to say, that we see it in K1-2. There's just people who don't do homework ever. There are kids who say, my parents don't believe in doing homework. And I'm always like, okay, but once you get to 3rd grade, once you get to 6th grade, you're going to miss lunch and recess. So it's setting the habits. But we did, a few years ago, have a lot of pushback on the teachers about the homework is ruining our family life, which I understand as a psychologist and a mother. So, but now I think that teachers are much more mindful about what they're giving, and that it is to set a habit. And we also see a difference in kids who do their 20 minutes of reading every night versus kids who don't do any reading, you're gonna get a huge difference in outcome.
No teacher creates work for the sake of creating
Right.
work, because it's work they have to deal with.
That's true, actually. You know, it's more. Why would they do that?
They might have a particular viewpoint. They might assign to, there might be an overload of homework, or there might be a poor coordination between homework assignments across disciplines. There's all kinds but nobody goes, I'm going to have them do all this work and I'm going to grade it.
Right.
Look at it.
Right.
So there is
And I raised 2 kids, still am, and had homework battles in 1st and 2nd grade because I defy you to find a student who likes to do homework. It's not about liking something, it's about responsibility. It's about this is a means to an end. This is about the bigger picture. It's the marshmallow story where the student who is able to hold off on eating 1 marshmallow, 2 hours later will have a bag full of marshmallows. And so we have to teach them that's the value that you teach. And I really do think that pushback is a reflection of what we're seeing now. And I think it's something that hopefully will address itself and self-correct. This has helped to self-correct it because kids also don't like to miss recess. They don't like
That
it.
was my question, actually. I want to echo what David said, was congratulations, because it seems like it's been a tremendous success. Was there concern or pushback, whether from parents or students? There's so many reports saying kids need to play. They need that recess. They need that free time. They need to be outside running around. So is there concern about stripping that away from them, particularly when it might be the kids who need it the most?
Definitely, and there's actually one student who needs it the most, the playtime, and that I was putting into homework room for weeks and still wasn't producing, and I said, well, this just becomes torture. And this was, a bunch of meetings with parents saying, I'm going to try this, do I have your support? Yes. Now I say, listen, they've been in there for 2 or 3 weeks and nothing, so I'm going to let them go back out to recess. Okay. So this is a different different type of challenge that this student has that we're still honestly grappling with. So yeah, there was definitely pushback from students.
Did we come in on your presentation, or are we done?
No, this is always good. No, this is fine.
Okay.
And I also want to mention, a lot of times when the 4th and 5th graders work within the homework room, what they'll do is those teachers will send those students to me for their lunch period. So they'll eat lunch with me to have the support to finish those assignments.
Yes.
And then at that, and then they still go out. So however many days they have to have lunch with me to make sure that work gets done, they're sent to me, but they're still ushered out when
But
they're
there's
recess
some
time.
flexibility there.
Yes.
Do you think it would be helpful?
It's something that you all should know, that we do value homework here. We don't value homework that is nonsensical. We value the most important thing you can do for your students, for your kids, is to read with them when they're babies. And then when they get to 3 and 4 years old, as soon as they can read a letter, you start having them read. And that 20 minutes of reading, it's the kids who don't do those reading logs that wind up doing this, because that's the foundation. Because now if you're in 7th grade reading social studies, there's a lot of text there. And it's a struggle for them because they don't have the habits. So I think at least if you said, as a culture, you must do the reading and you must do the reading logs, and we really value that as a school culture.
It's also, literacy is a priority, and I think we've had many discussions, but I do think that we could be much more vocal and public about our concerns about literacy in the district, and the importance of reading with your child. That time that connection, just simply the warmth of a book with a parent is really what builds literacy.
Absolutely.
Because they associate not as a lone task away where everyone's having fun, but a task that you do with your family.
And I have to say, and I feel like, I've been transparent my whole career here. If parents think that this is not how we do it, I have to say that you have every right to say, well, then this is not the district for you. This is how it works. This is a public school. This is what we do. This is how we educate children. We have kids going to Boston College, and kids are really doing well who sort of bought into our system. We have some really incredible teachers. We have a really safe and nurturing environment in our school. We have a wonderful group of board members and community members who are really education-minded and want the best for what's. But sometimes I think we could be a little tougher. I do think we could be a little tougher.
So how should we as a board encourage that practice? What should we do?
I think in the beginning of the year, just as, the principal or the superintendent would send out a letter, welcome to the school year, we're so excited, we hope you had a nice summer. Maybe something coming from the board that this is what we value, we're ready, this is what we're charged with. These are our district priorities, this is what we feel is important for you. We've heard that homework is an issue. We've heard that everybody thinks conflict is bullying, or whatever you want, however you want to approach it, but to hear I don't know how often the board goes out to community, because I'm not part of the community, but I think that would be a suggestion, is that at the beginning of the school year, you go out, and then support for your teachers. So at the first faculty meeting, come in and say, hey, we have your back. When the parents are pushing back, and we want to hear why they're pushing back. And I'm not saying that teachers are always right. Certainly, I'm in the middle, so I know that there's personalities and things happen. But I think it's important that there's a dialogue between the board, there's a dialogue between board and teachers and board and community. Everybody's sort of a united front in this building, and going out to community, say, this is what we value, this is sort of how we operate, and it's really important that we operate that way. And I think you'll have buy-in. I mean, we're talking about a small percentage of people, but I do think the percentage is sort of growing, where it's like, we can kind of do what we want. It's only kindergarten, first and second grade. What's the big deal? The big deal is it's going to be third through fifth, and then it's going to be middle school, and we all know what the big deal is. So I don't know if that helps or not. I'm sorry if I'm rambling, but.
That's okay. John, do you have anything you want to wrap up with before we get to any last
Yeah,
round of
there's
questions?
a couple of
here?
just closing slides about where we're going from here.
We've got questions. And we got hidden agenda.
I think just to highlight this is just to say that outside of TCIS, this is really about building internal capacity. All of the learning you're hearing, talking about giving credit to our professional staff, a lot is owed because a lot of people are going out to multiple trainings so that they could come back in and share their expertise, share their experiences, share their practices with their colleagues. Part of the way that we're doing that is to build those, to refine and build that capacity where that could happen throughout the professional day. And lastly, what is next? Next year is going to be a big year with PBIS being implemented for the entire student body, with complete buy-in from a very, very excited staff, where part of how we move forward is based upon the data that we collect to determine how we reteach and offer supports to students as needed, and then to continue the professional learning to make sure that we're doing everything with fidelity. And that was the wrap-up.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Questions? James, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess you touched on buy-in. What kind of buy-in do we have among the teachers? I think we have a core group of people that are becoming extremely literate in this particular priority and this aspect of student learning. Across the board with teachers and aides, I imagine that aides are equally as important. Any adult who has contact with a child has to buy into this. What kind of buy-in do we have?
Yeah, I can speak to that. At the very beginning of the PBIS process, the staff was surveyed just to get their perception on a lot of different areas of the building. And based upon that survey and the staff survey, we have about 85% buy-in for the PBIS initiative based upon staff response.
Do you find that more in the lower grades than the upper grades?
Their survey was done anonymously, so that really necessary. So I was able to aggregate it from teacher to teacher aide, custodial staff, and things of that nature.
I'm wondering when you get to the point where students are moving from subject to subject, you have these different personalities, different classroom expectations, you have 40 minutes with here, 40 minutes there. I would imagine that is probably difficult to create that a seamlessness among the middle school because of the way they're structured.
Well, I think the teachers at the secondary level have expressed that there's an urgency that we address it. So I think although what you're saying is true about the consistency from period to period, because of the nature of middle school, they see behaviors, and they're basically asking the question systemically, what can we do? So in terms of buy-in, I think that's actually a cross-section of the staff that sees the greatest need for it, and therefore I think that there is a desire to put some stuff into place.
And interestingly enough, we have like a couple of key staff members who come from schools with PBIS implemented, who've been saying, for a few years, we should really look into this. One being Coulter Young, our teacher, so that kind of covers special a little bit, and one is Chris Caliendo in social studies upstairs, so that that helps us as well, because there's a few PBIS folks coming from those schools. I was one as well, that are sprinkled throughout the building. And I was worried about the buy-in, and still, of course, you know, you have to be concerned about it. Worry now is strong. But when we first sat down as a faculty and we started to talk about it, and we were asked, like, what's the biggest problem in the school? And the teachers were able to say, and the aides were able to say, you know, we think running in the hallways is like one of our #1 priorities, you know? And just to say, okay, let's make that a huge priority for us. And so they feel like they're being heard, and they're driving sort of the process, which is important. Because like you said, it's not top down.
It's the ownership part of it that is actually fueling the buy-in aspect of it. So because they feel like they have control over what they're looking to see in terms of the expectations of the students, that level of buy-in is there because there's that level of ownership.
There's been some talk about putting together a manual or revising a manual, if there exists one, for substitutes. Is that something, I understand they can't go through the full training, but is there something from PBIS that could be implemented, you know, even just on a one sheet to hand to new subs to say, this is how we work in this school, here are some appropriate responses?
Absolutely. There's a twofold answer to that. One aspect of it is there's a lesson planning portion of PBIS. So in the same way we would teach academics, there's lessons that are attached to PBIS that teach these expectations to the students. There's also a PBIS handbook that is put together that includes all of the language, that includes, you know, situational responses and things of that nature, that, you know, when this fully gets rolled out to the staff in the fall, everyone will have a copy of that PBIS handbook, and that PBIS handbook would obviously also be available to our substitutes as well.
I would venture to say that next year will be a little messy, I think, comparatively to the year after, right?
Sure.
I think, you know, ideally we would love to really have started this in the spring, but we couldn't, right? The training was extensive, and not everybody needs those, you know, full day BOCES trainings that we all got. It's now going to be implemented from our teachers who were trained into the other teachers. But I would expect you'll really see you'll see a shift in the fall. But I think once you have a year of students that know, be safe, be responsible, be respectful, as if, you know, it's like the Cougar Pride mantra now, sort of taking on that. I think that's where you'll see substitutes really knowing the lingo, and that sheet of what it looks like and sounds like in the hallway, in the cafeteria.
Right, and
that will be
the other
everywhere.
aspect.
That will be posted
So
everywhere.
that's considered the matrix, so that covers every single setting and area. But let's say we just pulled out be safe, be responsible, and be respectful for the hallways. That is its own poster throughout the hallway. So as you're going through that hallway, you're seeing what those expectations are in that setting. You walk into the classroom, now you have that same poster for your classroom expectations, the cafeteria, the playground, so on and so forth. So it's always there as a resource for those students to be reminded, but also for our staff and faculty to be able to say, let's pause for a minute while we're in the hallway. Let's take a look at this. Are we meeting these expectations as we're walking through?
And you're happy with the outcomes?
In terms of?
Student behavior, student.
That would be I mean, that's the hope after full implementation. And that's the data piece of it, is that it's the examining of the data, it's the surveying of the staff, it's the surveying of the students on their understanding of their expectations. And that data is going to be collected throughout the year and literally every month analyzed by that PBIS team to make sure that we're implementing this with fidelity, and we're looking at it and we're addressing the needs and the concerns.
I think Marjorie mentioned the relationship between, you know, a student that's learning and the understanding that the teacher has of the student's emotional landscape, for lack of a better word. I'm wondering if teachers have, like, my experience as a teacher is, if I see someone look at their phone in a classroom, I know I'm not bringing some engagement. I'm probably not giving my best lesson, right? They might have their issues, and I might know their issues, but I also know that I'm not engaging them enough. So maybe I put my hand down on the desk and maybe, you know, start an iambic pentameter, a little Beowulf, something to, like, spark them, and it actually works, you know. So do teachers get the relationship between pedagogy and student engagement that way? I mean, most teachers do, but are we getting there where we're like, you know, how I do this lesson is as much setting up compliance and participation and positive energy as what I know about a student and particular behavioral interventions?
I feel like with responsive classroom, that's what it's all about. One part of responsive classroom is take a break. If a student after those 6 weeks is not doing what's expected on the RUG, I don't even have to tell them why they're taking a break. I simply say take a break. They go, they sit in the take a break chair, they reflect on it quickly, put the timer, and they come back to the RUG. If I have 3 students taking a break, that's not a student problem, that's a me problem. And I need to step up my game as an educator. So I feel like in responsive classroom, it really touches on that.
I also think just the TCI training, Laura, what's the percentage of teachers that have now been trained in TCI?
28.
Awesome.
We just had our 3rd cohort complete their 4-day training.
So 28 faculty members?
Which are teacher aides, teachers, administrators, part-timer. We just want to have a common language, common practice around therapeutic crisis.
So, and the reason I ask that, and you hear therapeutic crisis and you think somebody has to be in crisis to utilize the tools, but a lot of times we're asking ourselves, that student is not engaged, and that is the first thing you start to see is a little bit of agitation, and it's about the setting. So sometimes, if you're a reflective teacher, the lesson is part of the setting. So you have to reflect like, well, there's something that I'm not doing that's not reaching this child, or is enabling that child to drift off, or worse, start to become agitated. Can I go get a drink of water? Like, this is boring stuff. Like, so I think that is very helpful. Okay.
Sorry.
Our agenda's
You won't
in
be
crisis.
surprised. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight, Michael and Paul. If there are any other last questions, now is the time for brief answers. Yes.
Is any one of you, or are all 3 of you on the search committee for the guidance counselor?
Yes.
Excellent. Good.
An excellent and brief answer. Well done.
Great.
Thank you all very much. Very informative. Comprehensive. I would only say that when someone is channel surfing in a week or so, when this video is up on the public access, if they stumble onto your little skit, what the Anyway, Laura, superintendent's remarks.
I just want to say thank you so much. I know there's so much work that you're doing in informing yourself and teaching yourselves all of these new strategies. And the social emotional work that's happening here is just incredible. And so thank you, and I know it goes beyond these walls. There's so many people doing this work because we care for our kids and we want them to have the skills and the experiences and the love needed to be successful and happy and learning. So thank you for your hard work, and I'm really excited about where we're going with all of this. So thank you. And your presentation was informative, passionate, clear, organized, concise. It was an interactive and engaging. So thank you for that. I think it's a great model for all of our presentations because it's been an hour and 20 minutes, and I've been engaged the whole time and learning so much. So thank you.
Sorry about that.
That was good. Yeah, it was really good, really good. So thank you. I don't know if you want to stay. Please go home and have dinner with your families because we're going to get into the agenda. So, which is riveting and exciting as well. But
Just out of curiosity, were those the superintendent's remarks?
I just have 3 short remarks. Just school counselor search update. We've gone through.
No. Sorry. No. We have a long agenda. And I, by all means, share comments at the end or with any of the individuals before they depart, if that would be helpful, but we'd like to get through.
So, school counselor, we went through 250 resumes, screened them. We did 20 initial interviews. We had 5 candidates come back for committee interviews, and we have 2 candidates coming back for demos. So we should have a sense of who we will be recommending as our new school counselor in just a matter of 5 or 6 days. So it was a great process, and thank you, team. It's a process that if you respect it, it usually works out for the best for all. Principal search, we're in that search as well. Just a reminder that we have a parent community forum tomorrow, which is going to be facilitated by BOCES folks to talk to parents what are the characteristics they would like to see in their next leader, as well as some challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for Garrison that will inform our principal search. That is at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then there's another one at 5 o'clock. So please come and share your ideas. If you're not able to come in person, there's an online community survey on our website. That closes on the 15th because the posting closes on the 15th at 11 o'clock. So we want to hear your voices. And lastly, as we prepare and celebrate for Adalia's retirement, which I hear she's going to take care of her grandchildren, she's going to eat chocolate and travel. We will be thinking about her replacement and what the degree of replacement means to us as a community in the foreign language area. And then we're also going to discuss the current second grade and possibly dividing it, and that would include the addition of another teacher. And we're going to talk about that during our July meeting. And that's all I have.
Questions for Laura? If not, Sue, we got treasurer's report.
Yep. You have the April treasurer's report. First part I'll go over is the investments. We started out the month with $7,559,344.80. We had interest income of $1,753.14 and transfers into the multi-fund of $310. And we ended the month at $7,251,97.94. And with the multi-fund, we started out the month at $646,204.62. We had payroll into fund transfers. Basically, it was moving funds from the general fund to the trust and agency internally there. Of $3,213,17. Overall revenue changes of $3,700,000. Overall disbursement changes of $3,200,000. So we ended off the month with $879,098.61.
Questions for Sue?
Sue, were any of those disbursements unusual?
No,
salaries and the usual stuff?
Mostly basic, as usual. You see under payroll and interfund transfers is $2,903,700 under trust and agency. You look down at the general fund on the wire transfers and interfund transfers. It was basically transferred into the general fund. So it didn't change bank accounts. It was just an accounting thing. Basically, it was catching up with payroll. The trust and agency holds basically money for the general fund. There's a transfer that has to happen. There it happened. Okay?
We're roughly on target though?
On target with,
As far as meeting this year's budget, and where do you imagine we're gonna end up June 30th?
okay, all right. So that would probably go more into the warrant reports and the revenue status and the budget status reports. But yes, we're pretty much on target. I mean, we've spent a lot of money this year, so I think one thing that I did mention, the finance committee was, we will be dipping into reserves this year. That's my, prediction of probably about 400,000, 350 to 450,000. That's where we're ending off. So that would be really more in the next section of the budget status, revenue status. Everything else is pretty much business as usual. And then we have a budget transfer. I know the board has to act on the treasurer's report, but a budget transfer of 86,261, and that's really, it's just the end of the year. We're spending money to try to get caught up on a lot of things, and look at the transfer. I can tell you if there's anything glaring out at me. Just popped up now. The largest one there that I see is basically health services. We're actually being charged from Haldane now for health services being provided at the Manitou School. Something new. Wasn't really a cost I was expecting to be as high as it was, but we did get a bill recently, and I think you might be approving it tonight or at the last meeting. Was it the last meeting? So, that's one of the things, and then it's just the end of the year, so the lines are getting spent, and we have to do, budget transfers for most of the lines.
So it's from Haldane, because Haldane provides the services, but it's Garrison kids going to Manitou, is that right?
Private school.
I mean, we do health services with a lot of different schools, but
Yeah.
it's a little different. The school is up the road 2 miles, we're paying health services for, but that's,
Okay, but that's true with a lot of, like, we've had Poughkeepsie Day and various,
Yeah.
it's the district that school is in that provides the health services and then charges us
it's all
back for
moved to
them.
Haldane too, so I've done a lot of phone calling back and forth, because of our it's new to them too as far as the billing goes, so.
If there are any questions on the treasurer's report, then resolved, as a resolution is the resolve the Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District accepts the treasurer's report for April 2018 as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Aye. No abstentions, no nays. So we covered pretty much, in answer to James's or Derek's questions, budget status, revenue, warrant reports. Is there anything else you want to cover there before I get out to
No, unless there's a specific
the
question.
improvement? Okay, I think
Are we putting anything in the capital improvement fund?
That's later on in the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, more.
Sorry.
Once you approve it.
Stand one second.
Keeping us on agenda.
Is the 350 to 450 draw on reserves, we had budgeted a substantial draw on reserves, I know. What was the budgeted amount of drawn reserves and what's your expectation? It was more like
Well, for this
6
current year, I wanna say it was about 775,000, something around that. I mean, we're just estimating, for this current year that we're in. So somewhere in that.
was
yeah.
what was in the budget, and
Yeah.
of that you expect we'll actually need 350 to 450, something like that.
Yes.
So it's not as ugly as it was, but not pretty. I don't like spending reserves.
So we have to approve the budget, let's approve the budget transfer? Yes, we've covered that. So resolve the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District approves the budget transfer number 7 in the amount of $86,261.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions for Sue and I? I think we've really well just covered that. So all those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions, no nays. We have a consent agenda with a number of items.
Okay.
So resolve the Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District approves the consent agenda items B through K as presented. Item B, accept the resignation of Michael Williams from the position of school guidance counselor effective at the close of business June 30, 2018, as I always do. This is a rather clinical acceptance, but I would say we accept with regret in this case.
Under protest.
Agreed.
As if we had anything to do.
Let's vote no.
Make him a counter.
Get him back here.
Let's table it.
This is something, appoint our videographer. Approve the appointment of Richard Redmond as videographer for recording a Board of Education meetings at the rate of $215 per meeting, plus an additional fee of $50 for any portion of the meeting over 2 hours. It looks like you get that one tonight. Over 2 hours, running up to 3 hours, and $25 for each additional half hour, and $50 for the online posting of meeting videos for the 2018-19 school year. Item D, approve the 2018 summer work maximum of 5 days for Nancy Romano, technology specialist, at her regular daily pay rate. Item E, approve the 2018 summer work maximum of 12 days for Melissa DeFonce, school nurse, at her regular hourly rate of pay. Approve the summer work for maximum of 3 days for Jennifer Muller, CSE CPSE chairperson, at her regular daily rate of pay. Item G, approve Pat Martz to provide business and CSE office support July 1 through August 31, 2018, at her regular hourly rate of pay. Item H, I got this in the right order. Approve Catherine Clark to provide summer school bus monitor clerical office support from July 2 through August 10, 2018, at her regular daily rate of pay. Item I, approve the 2018/19 contract of services for Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. That contract is in your package. Item J, approve the contract of Edutech Limited for on-site information technology services for the period July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019, at the cost of $30,319.50. Question about that in a moment, but that agreement is in your package. Item K, approve the services agreement reinstatement with the Omni Group for the fiscal year July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019, an annual fee of $3,600. That package, or that agreement is also in your package. That concludes the items of the consent agenda. I need a so moved.
So
So moved.
I need a second. We got a second. Laura, on the Edutech, 30,000. Is that flat changed? Where is it from relative
It's
to
a
last
very
year?
slight increase. This current year
Yeah.
it's about 29,000. So it's a very slight.
So it's okay. It's less than $1,000 increase.
Yes.
So, okay, good. Any other questions for Laura or Sue on the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor? Wait.
Sorry. The BOSE's contract is pro forma. Is it pretty much the similar contract as we had last year?
Yes.
Scope of services unchanged. Fee
Anything?
amounts are over.
Okay.
And it can be tailored, like this is sort of what we predict we'll be using,
Right.
but we may have a need unexpectedly. I foresee like translation, our population's changing a little bit, so communicating with our more diverse population and with our ENL teacher as well, just
Okay.
as an example. But it can ebb and flow, the needs. And then there are some standards that stay.
Okay. Sorry.
So, I think I was looking for a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions, no nays. Action items, there are a couple. Oh, there's a,
Discussion
Do we have
item
to-
first.
Discussion.
oh, mine.
Number
Oh,
six.
yeah, never mind.
Playing Diane's role.
Review of committee, as discussion items, review of committee minutes. The Audit and Finance Committee met. Those minutes are in your package. If anybody was on either of those committees and attended and wants to call something to our attention, now's the time to do it. I didn't think so. Tetra Tech. At our last meeting, I had said we have 4 meetings left before, this is one of 4 meetings we have left before our Tetra Tech advisors have said we have to put a resolution before the board to approve the capital project. Scope and budget amounts to be determined. And I said we would take up this discussion at each of our successive board meetings. I'd like to, for the purposes of tonight's discussion, resolve one basic question. Are we all in agreement that we will pursue a capital project? We will put before the voters a resolution for a capital project to cover the items, some number or all of those items that we've been discussing. But up until now, we have talked about this, but we have never said as a board, yes, we're going to do this. The scope and the final budget still to be determined, but yes, we're in agreement that there's something needs to be done. The repairs are on facilities that are in imminent need of addressing, et cetera. So is there any discussion beyond the yes, we are going to do something? We're all in agreement on that. It doesn't require a vote, it doesn't require any action, it just says, okay, so then from between the 3 remaining board meetings, our task is going to be to look very hard at that spreadsheet and decide on which of the items we're going to pursue and what we're going to put before the voters. So they're big questions, but the biggest one of all, I think we've just gotten behind us, is yes, we are going to do something. We have to. Not are, we have to do something.
I think we're in the case of the biggest item within the project, that's without, we must do that.
Yeah.
That's an imperative, which is the heating in the elementary school.
Good. All right, well, that was a succinct discussion.
Is there like a Red Sox game you're interested in seeing tonight?
No. I just need to I'm aware that we have a lot to cover. We also have an executive session tonight that will involve some substantive discussions about collective bargaining. So I want to be mindful of everybody's time. But if there's anything you want to go back on and review, I'm happy to at least entertain the idea. We have had presented to us a proposition that we as a board should pass a climate change resolution asserting the board's concern over climate change and committing us to certain actions. A draft of that resolution was reviewed, I believe, at least the idea was that it was going to be reviewed by the Environmental Education Committee since our last meeting. My understanding is that some level of review has taken place, and it is now for us to discuss the advisability of doing a resolution at all, and if we are to do one, what it should say. The floor is open for discussion.
Should we hear a reading of the resolution as it currently stands?
We certainly can, and I'm happy to do that. I would also note that there was a bit of email traffic when as between the board members, and when the resolution was first circulated, and we sort of tabled some of those comments. So those of you who haven't had comments there ought to feel free to share them now. Yeah, I have a copy of the resolution.
That'd be helpful.
Sure. Right, it says, whereas there is broad scientific consensus among climate scientists that human activities contributing to increases in greenhouse gas emissions are the dominant cause in climate change, and whereas children represent a particularly vulnerable group because of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere will accumulate over coming decades and will profoundly impact today's children throughout their lives, as well as the lives of future generations. And whereas the Garrison Union Free School Board recognizes climate change as a generation justice and human rights issue, and whereas the global impact, urgency, and magnitude of the challenge of addressing climate change calls for leadership in all sectors of society, all institutions, and all elected leaders. Whereas we work to ensure that all Gulf students graduate as globally minded citizens, that phrase is in quotation marks, now therefore be it resolved that the Gulf School Board celebrates existing district sustainability initiatives such as the existing Environmental Education Committee and its work, be ongoing initiatives that encourage our children to experience their natural environment through their schools, forest, partnership with Hudson Valley Seed, and other environmental, outdoor, and place-based education. Let it therefore be resolved that GUS shall direct the Environmental Education Committee to develop recommendations for taking action on climate change that are within the purview of the district, such as A, targets for reducing district greenhouse gas emissions, B, facilities and operational priorities and projects including transportation, purchasing, maintenance, landscaping, and construction, C, curricular and educational opportunities such as climate literacy, climate advocacy, and climate justice, D, increasing composting and recycling. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education calls on Congress to take swift and effective action to implement a comprehensive climate change policy to protect our children's future. That is it. Anybody want to weigh in on their thoughts?
Oh, I would.
Anybody who shared, anybody who shared anything previously, by all means, feel free to reiterate.
I think this is a burgeoning movement in the country, and I think it's be great for Garrison to join it. I would just add to that resolution something about not just to Congress, but to our local New York State representatives to take action at the state level, because there are in the absence of any kind of federal policy, with the federal government basically turning its back on what science has to say about climate change. A lot of the initiatives are in fact happening at the grassroots level and at the state and city level, and I would add something to that that directs our representatives in the state assembly and the state senate to take appropriate action.
Derek, I think you had some.
Yeah, I mean,
concerns
so
just the about the overall
I'm all for
approach.
the spirit. I'm a little unclear what we're trying to achieve, frankly. Right? I mean, we can proclaim all sorts of things, but I guess I'd be more interested in a discussion about how we're going to teach kids differently, or what we're going to do, or how we're going to make alternate energy sources part of the curriculum that's practical. I mean, frankly, none of the politicians that we're naming here are going to care or act differently because we proclaim this. So I'm just.
Well, see, I mean, I certainly.
Maybe
I'm
disagree.
happy to
That's what I
respond.
want to have a dialogue
Okay,
about.
I mean,
Is what are we trying to achieve, and
I-
then we can say what should be in a proclamation.
I can tell you what I think we're achieving by doing it.
Yep.
We have a situation where we have a crisis which scientists are saying, not just us folks, but scientists are saying is the single biggest problem facing us as a civilization at the moment. There is a broad consensus in the scientific community about that. But in spite of that, we have a situation where the mass media essentially ignores it, with the exception of the New York Times and the Washington Post. I can footnote that. The major television networks last year, 4 networks, did 4 stories together collectively linking climate change to these weather catastrophes that we've experienced last year with hurricanes and wildfires and droughts. 4. So the media doesn't talk about it. Our politicians, Trump has taken the position that he's following the strategy that just don't talk about it.
The ostrich position.
Don't talk about it, right? Don't give them the satisfaction of putting it on the agenda. So politicians don't talk about it, the media doesn't talk about it, and your school board doesn't talk about it, and your neighbors don't talk about it. So it can't be that important. So this is essentially a response to that kind of.
I would say, David, I am skeptical about the resolution for all the reasons you are so clearly passionate, for want of a better word. Yeah. And I would only observe that it's been our long-standing practice to try to be an apolitical board. None of us ran for these positions with the endorsement of a political party. In fact, recently, as April, we declined an offer from the Republican county executive who was running for office to come and present to us on a suit the county's involved in over suing the opioid manufacturers, because we didn't want to be perceived as providing a platform for an elected officer who was up for re-election. So we have tried to be, and I think correctly so, apolitical in that regard. And whatever else it's the merits of the resolution or the climate change case, it is substantially a political issue. It may not be entirely. It is a technical. It is a technical issue. It is an innovation issue, etc. But there is a substantial political component, in as much as the resolution itself that I just read calls for us to urge Congress to take action, and you would have us go further and involve ourselves in trying to influence politicians on climate change. So it becomes substantially political, and I think that unfortunately puts us at the top of what I would otherwise call a slippery slope, because I'm concerned about what the limiting principle is. If we take it upon ourselves to enact this particular resolution on climate change, how do we say no to the next group of interested citizens who come before us with a resolution they want us to support on some other issue? And I'll give you an example. The combined government debt in the United States currently is about $21 trillion, and that number keeps growing. And a broad-based consensus of economists and fiscal experts believe that the brunt of the full weight of that debt will be borne by our children and other children. And whereas the cost of servicing that debt will inevitably crowd out our ability to fund education, et cetera, therefore, we urge Congress to pass a balanced budget amendment to fundamentally reform entitlement payments, et cetera. You see where I'm going with this. You can define almost anything as a children's issue because we're concerned about children, therefore we should be taking a position on it. And that is not to say that any individual member of this board or any individual member of the community or any collection of people can and shouldn't advocate for what they feel strongly about. I'm just concerned about the precedential value that we set when we set out or we stake out this particular issue on which we're going to take this political position. I just don't know how we say no to the next group. And that's my fundamental reservation. As to the specific, and now, by the way, and I make all of these comments without regard to and without any judgment at all as to the merits of the specific language of the resolution itself, or the case for climate change, the component about which humans are responsible and other factors might be, but those are beyond my ability to judge, and I'm not doing it now. I do have some issues if we go further with the specific language of the resolution itself. I think we go far beyond the charter of the Environmental Education Committee with what's recommended here, but those are second order issues that we can address if we get over my first concerns about precedent.
I have another thing that's just, I guess, a sort of matter of principle, like what you're suggesting, right? And by the way, this is not in any way, David, that I'm not personally, I personally would agree with everything you said, that there's not enough dialogue about this, it's an important issue, et cetera, but at least this proclamation started with, an assessment of the evidence, right? And if someone were to come back, we passed this, someone came back and said, well, what did the board do to evaluate the evidence for and against climate change? We'd have to say we didn't do anything, right? Somebody put a proclamation and we stamped it, right? And that's not to say that the evidence is not accurate, but it's neither our place nor our activity to actually evaluate the evidence and opine on the evidence. I think it is our place and activity to say the environment's incredibly important, educating our kids on the environment's important, that should be part of their curriculum. They should learn about it, they should learn by doing. We could
exactly
have
in
them
the
learn
charter
by
of the
doing,
Environmental
and, like the
Education.
actions,
Right.
I'm totally supportive of. We should have solar panels and the kids should be learning how they work and installing them, or whatever the specific set of things are. But the kind of legality almost of saying, we have considered this issue and we declare this doesn't stand up to somebody pressing on it if they were.
I think what you're looking for is actually laid out quite clearly in the Environmental Education Committee charter. It states all of those propositions as basically as you just said, very important to us, and here's, as a school board and a district, how we are expressing our concern and acting on it. In the context of
I would just say that I'm not sure that, I think we're always political in one form or another. I think what I would draw a distinction between political and partisan. I think when we're concerned about opioid addiction, we get political. I think when we're concerned about gun safety or safety in the community, we get political. I think we try not to be partisan. I think we avoid that, and I think we're really good at that. But that doesn't mean we're not political. I don't actually see this as a political issue. I see the politics is the last thing, a necessary engagement in order to respond to a phenomenon or a situation, a context, which is inescapable. You just can't say, well, we're not political, we're not going to get involved in the environment. I feel like there's no way around us not engaging this, is my point. I don't see how I can say, well, I'm not going to vote, I don't think the district has a place to do this. I think the district would more likely have to find a real good reason not to.
I have a few things to
So.
say about that as well. So the first thing is, I think that so I support this, but with revisions. And the first thing is, I think that we need to situate the resolution geographically, and I'd like to have the beginning say something like, whereas the Garrison Union Free School District is located in the Mid-Hudson Valley, the birthplace of the modern environmental movement, and whereas the Hudson Valley was designated a National Heritage Site by the National Park Service in 1996 due to its unique landscape, history, and the influence of the landscape on artistic and cultural creations. Therefore, go on. But then the other thing that I want to add is that, yes, everything is political. Breastfeeding is political.
Right.
School choice is political.
Right.
Where you decide to buy a home, if you can afford a home, is political.
Taxes are political.
Yeah, but there's a book by Frederick Rich that's called Getting to Green, Saving Nature, a Bipartisan Approach, or Solution rather. And he talks about what he calls center green, and that's where the conservative agenda and the agenda of, I guess we'll call it the left, overlap. And that's where we have to work together. And this is an issue that affects everybody. I mean, this is why when we had Hurricane Irene, Cold Spring flooded. And we're going to see more and more effects in this area where we live. More and more storms, more and more crazy downed trees on, 9D. So perhaps if we lose the last sentence about urging Congress to do something, maybe that would be more palatable. And I think that we've talked about that a little bit, but.
I've got no illusions that whenever we take a stand, there's a political ramification. I have no illusion of that. But it's not really, it's like going against, like standing up and saying, we must recognize gravity. It's that basic in my mind, and the fact that no one's talking about gravity or acknowledging gravity, it's not like the flat earthers have an opinion. It's not that it might need to be heard but not considered. The science is only getting more extreme. What was out today was that the Antarctic ice sheet, and I don't want to get into this too deeply into the weeds, but the Antarctic ice sheet is melting at a rate 3 times faster than they thought it was going to 5 years ago. That's a lot. That's going to eat cities. It's going to make people move places. It's going to impact our demographics. It's going to impact our overall health. The spread of disease, the spread of viruses, and various bacterial infections. This has all been mapped out in a number of ways, and I guess what we're asking for is that people really put this at the forefront of our mind. If it was I just don't even think of it as an issue. I just think, I don't think of the air as an issue. I don't think of oxygen as an issue. I just think of it as, this is a fact that we have to deal with. It's not an issue. That's my problem.
You don't care to address the precedential question?
Yes, I want to address that, because I think that you're raising an important point, and I disagree with you. I think it is a political issue. It's been made a political issue. It shouldn't be, but it is a political issue. There's no question about that. As for the precedential question, I think you've got to ask yourself, are you taking an absolute position on that? I mean, for instance, suppose that, and this came close to being true, suppose that the national administration were to say that every school must arm their teachers, right? That's going to be a requirement. Every school has to have an armed guard to deal with school shootings. You wouldn't want to say something about that?
What do we?
I mean, so what I have to say is, I don't think this is one issue. I mean, this is obviously not. This is a particularly concern of mine, but I don't think that climate change is one issue among many. I don't think that it's quite the same as the budget, or quite the same as a lot of other things that are opioids. I mean, somebody that I work with, said if we don't fix climate, nothing else matters. And I think that's where we are. And I think that if you became more familiar with the issue, and you may already be quite familiar with it,
No.
it is an overarching.
Let me say this.
challenge.
I think my awareness is at least as high as anyone else's on this board, with the possible exception of you, David, because you've internalized so much of this so clearly. But it is not at the level that allows me to make a judgment on some of the assertions that are in the preamble to this resolution, because I don't believe that there are no questions left to be answered on climate change. So, for example, if and Jill has suggested some edits, and I think maybe where we want to go with this, if I were to make a suggested edit, I would suggest looking at supporting, becoming more aware of, teaching children about the possibility that there are technical innovations on the drawing board still to be imagined, which may be a much more effective solution to climate change than any of us have possibly considered. I call your attention to a piece in The Atlantic just this week about an industrial scale carbon capture, an economically viable industrial scale carbon capture that may be, if not a silver bullet, a substantial advance in the technologies. And this makes no reference to any of that.
Right, now, well, because economically viable is a big question mark about that, but I mean, I have any problem with the idea of looking at alternatives that are technological, for sure.
So there's a suggestion of some language. By the way, and Jill has some very good suggestions. If we're going to do something, you would have us become more political. I would suggest maybe if Jill wants to take another crack and you want to work with her at this and give us something to consider, I'll give you a suggested technical language. I would also say, by the way, and this is, I said I had some concerns, as to the whereases and the charter of the Environmental Education Committee, it's not at all clear to me that the responsibilities the committee would take upon itself are within its subject matter expertise, and that it also there is at least the opportunity for it to, for those perceived responsibilities to get in the way of the jobs of the people we're paying to do them, namely our superintendent, our manager of business, our manager of finance, et cetera, and facilities. So those are, I'd have real concerns about
I think the idea
that.
of educating ourselves makes perfectly good sense on that. But I want to get a response from you on the presidential question. I mean, are there no policy questions out there?
No, but what I'm saying is, I think it's a very real possibility that someone will come, some group can come before this board and say, as in the instant case, the example I posed to you.
Right.
There will be no resources to do anything other than service debt. There'll be no resources to educate children, no resources to, they will crowd out resources to clean up the environment, crowd out, et cetera, and we will have no basis on which to say, okay, we don't want to do, we should do that one too. Now, maybe that's the direction this board and all boards are heading. I think that way madness lies, but.
Why couldn't we preserve the prerogative to say yes on some and no on others?
Well, because, that's fine, but so, yes, clearly, some extraordinary, some out of the blue, wacko things. But when someone has a credible thing that we might not necessarily agree with, but still makes the same, basically makes the same propositional argument that this does for climate change on, for example, government spending, or gun safety, or breastfeeding, or whatever. I mean, you got a very, if we don't necessarily agree with it, we have very little basis for saying no.
I guess just to build on that, Ray, the thing that gives me pause is, or the question is, what's the business of the board? And I would suggest the business of the board is to focus on things that we can have material impact and then improve the education of our kids, and spending a lot of time debating the language and whether we're concerned about the Hudson Valley's environment and history or the global impact or whatever is a lot less material than spending our time talking about how we actually want to change the educational curriculum, how we want to take as a given the environment is important. I don't think you'll find a lot of people disagree that the environment is important, and I would rather we just assert the environment is important, one whereas, right? Whereas we want to pass a better planet on to our kids, not a worse planet. We want to do these, I'm more interested in our time being spent on actions and things we can do differently and things that we can build into the curriculum and ways that we teach our kids than going back on 6 drafts of language and Hudson Valley's in and global is out. That's my main concern, not that I don't, that's it.
You don't want to, you feel like it's just beyond the board's purview, or at least it was not.
It's not purview, we're not going to have, like, I'm just interested in having impact, not pontificating.
We have to build a building, we have to hire a principal, we have to hire a guidance counselor, we have to figure out how we're going to teach Spanish and to whom.
I mean, there's a material debate, do we care enough to make the school a zero carbon emission school?
I would challenge the
look at the
notion
debate.
that by doing that, this is simply a vain, pointless exercise that has no impact. I think that if Garrison were the only school board in New York State to do it, it would probably have a lot of impact. But I think that what you're seeing is a growing movement of school boards in a society where this issue is being systematically ignored, course, saying that we have some stewardship responsibility over our children, and they're making a statement at a time when this issue is being criminally ignored. That's my view.
I would say that there's probably language we could write into this that would, might address the precedent quality.
Mhm.
I think if we framed it so that you say, we recognize this is a nonpartisan issue, that it might be perceived as, that it has political ramifications, we assert this aspect of it, I think might help us find consensus.
Notwithstanding that I agree with Derek about circulating more and more drafts, I think it's clear at this point we do not have language that we're all comfortable with signing on to. So if James, Jill, Derek, we want to, I'll by all means opine too, and see where we go with this. Anything else on this one?
I think what's positive, I think maybe there's I guess the question is, what is this supposed to do, right? And maybe this is supposed to start the conversation of what are we doing about this issue. So maybe there's a cart leading a horse, perhaps. Maybe the resolution is symbolic, but the symbol sometimes drives the actualities in the world.
Yeah. No. But yeah. But I'm.
That was a very circumspect well. I agree with Derek. What do we, how are we educating students around climate change? How we educating, teachers about climate change? How are we educating? I mean, that matters in a way, more than adopting symbolic gestures.
True.
But I'm willing to adopt.
I'm willing to do a symbolic gesture.
But I disagreed with the characterization that this is a symbolic gesture.
I know, I understand it.
It could be. It could not. I think context and what happens to it might make it real.
I smile only because I know what's next on the agenda.
For whoever's drafting the next number of versions, I would suggest humbly that less is probably more in the proclamation, rather than 7 whereases. Whereas we recognize that climate change in the environment is a critical issue facing our generation and future generations, therefore, or something like that, not.
Action items from the sublime, as I said last week, to not more sublime.
Okay.
Approved playground plaque language. Last week we charged those members of the board who had some concerns about the last iteration of the playground plaque to work with GSEF to come up with language that was acceptable to all. It is my understanding that we now have that language, and we have a resolution to accept that. So the resolution is resolve the Board of Education of Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the following language to be placed on the new playground plaque. This play space made possible thanks to the generous donors of the Garrison Children's Education Fund, and there is an offset quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson which says, "It is a happy talent to know how to play."
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Can I just ask one question?
Sorry, that's right. No, you're
I
absolutely right.
just have one question, which is whether GSEF is happy with the language of this. I wasn't in the last meeting, but I think there was some discussion about whether individuals should be named.
We had a subcommittee.
Are people happy with
May
it?
I speak to this? Yes.
Yeah, by all means.
We appreciate the board's timeliness in addressing this concern and meeting with us so quickly. We had a very productive and thoughtful meeting where I feel like we reached a wonderful consensus. There is still more work to be done, which we are doing with Laura, in relation to how we recognize donors. And I think this conversation will continue to be ongoing.
Okay, but as far as if we go print a plaque or engrave a plaque and put it up, is GSEF happy with it? That's all. Okay.
We are happy with it.
Maybe. You're happy on it.
Maybe too broad a term.
No, I really do want to say that I think we are happy, and I think that the efforts made by the subcommittee who came together really helped us reach a wonderful place for the community to move forward with the play space and how GSEF and the board and hopefully PTA can work together in the future. And that in terms, it was also an amazingly wonderful conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
It's very good to hear.
I would say that your suggestion to
pages long. And resolve the Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District, pursuant to the regulations of the Commissioner of Education and the Education Law, hereby designates Haldane High School in the Haldane Central School District and James I. O'Neill High School in the Highland Falls Fort Montgomery Central School District as receiving high schools for the education of pupils in grades 9 through 12 residing in the Garrison Union Free School District for the 2018/19 school year. I need a so moved.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a question, how many students do we have going to Haldane? Do you have the numbers?
What is it?
I think it was 6 and 12.
6 and 12.
6
Six
to Haldane,
and
12
12
to
to
O'Neill,
O'Neill.
2 private. Is this on?
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, that's 20, yeah.
And what was the previous year? Do you have any sense of that?
It was
Roughly.
favored in the other direction.
It was in
more,
the other
more to
direction.
Haldane than O'Neill.
Pendulum is swung back the other way.
Okay.
So which it does episodically year on year. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions, no nays. Now we have the high school instructional contract with Highland Falls Fort Montgomery. Resolve the Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District hereby approves the contract with the Highland Falls Fort Montgomery Central School District for instructional services for the 2018-19 school year, according to the stipulation of settlement dated August 17, 2005. The last actual tuition rate for the 16-17 school year was $12,377 per student. I need a so moved.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion? That's unchanged, right? Sewers, what's our
It actually went down.
down? Isn't
It
it?
went down, but that's not unusual with Highland
Because of-
Falls, it goes up and down.
Yeah, because of the
Um,
federal
so-
fund.
yeah.
formula.
We actually got a slight refund in our payment from last year, because we're always sort of basically a year behind
Right.
And
with rates.
next year, seniors, is that a bubble class?
Yes.
The one's going out to the bubble class, yeah.
Next year.
Yeah, oh, next year, oh, well,
Wait, oh, seniors, I was thinking 8th grade, sorry.
No, it's either next year, I don't know. when-
No, 11th is a small one.
No, I think it's the 11th grade going now is, next year's 11th grade is the bubble class, so
Okay.
2 years out.
got it.
I'm talking about the big 36.
Right, right.
Yeah, right. All those in favor? Aye. All right, now this is where Sue indicated we get to, in answer to, I think, Derek's question earlier, and that's the appropriation of reserves. Resolve the Board of Education, the Garrison Union Free School District hereby authorizes the appropriation of reserves as follows. $137,330, $137,339 from the Retirement System Contribution Reserve Fund and $347,932 from the Debt Service Fund in the 2017-18 General Fund to be used as revenue toward the 2017-18 school budget. I need a so moved.
So moved.
I need a second. Seconded. Sue, so 347, 447, about, you're moving about just under
It's not
500,000.
moving, it's just, the board authorizing, that we could use these reserves for this
Got it.
current year.
Right.
The next one is, authorizing, any leftover funds to be put into reserves or capital fund.
Okay.
And these amounts correspond to what was originally in the budget, but we're just now saying we actually are going to need to use
Exactly what
it?
was in this year's budget.
Okay, so this is just saying, we know it was in the budget, but we're authorizing the use of it, and your expectation is not all of this, more like 350 to 450 would be used, is what you said, but,
Yes.
okay, got it. I just got lost in the process.
No, I got the same, good question. All those in favor?
Aye.
No abstentions, no nays. Last is the authorize the funding of year-end reserves. Resolve the Board of Education, the Garrison Union Free School District hereby authorizes the funding of the district's approved reserves and capital reserve fund with the excess of 4% of the unappropriated fund balance at June 30, 2018, after the designated amount for tax reduction has been set. Allocation of such excess fund balance will be determined subsequent to June 30, 2018, and prior to setting the next tax levy. I need a so moved.
So moved.
I need a second, and so Sue. So,
And basically, at the end of this year, when all expenses are done and the auditors have put their blessing on everything. If there's money left over, this allows us to put money into the reserves and or the capital fund. So the wording's there for both of them. The numbers are not determined yet. I'm hoping, I'm hoping that we can put a little money into the capital reserve fund. I'm hoping around 200,000.
That's what the Tetra Tech people indicated at our last discussion, so that would be terrific. All those in favor? Aye. No abstentions, no nays. All right, good work, everyone. Public comment. Anyone, Chris?
God.
No one.
I'll make my monthly, weekly appearance.
That's okay, go right ahead.
I'm Crystal Ford. So I just wanted to say thank you for discussing the resolution tonight. I think there's only a couple of things that I would just like to address. I just came back from Washington, D.C. I got to be at a conference with a bunch, 1,400 people from across the country lobbying for carbon pricing with their representatives. And I feel very optimistic because I learned one thing. 18 to 35-year-olds across the spectrum, Republican, Democrat, all believe the same thing when it comes to climate change. So the young people are getting it. So I was very encouraged to hear that. Also, just I think when you mentioned the point of, if the Environment Committee is taking on things that are sort of outside of its jurisdiction, I was just thinking about how we could be of help. So if we're able to do research on solar project grants or geothermal grants or stuff that can ease the burden from your staff so they don't have to do the research, we do the research and then give it to them so they can go forth. I feel like that's not outside of our purview. Like if we have the time to help you, we would gladly like to do that. And then lastly, it's you know how I feel. I've talked about it a million times. But anyways, thank you very much for taking the time to discuss it tonight, and hopefully we can come to some sort of thing. Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tormey, and I am here as a second grade parent. I'm sorry they left. I wanted to thank them for that amazing presentation. And I also wanted to say how wonderful the responsive classroom has been for the second grade. That one. And how important and interesting the homework has been. I think that classroom environment, that amazing teacher, has introduced a level of thinking in that classroom that is just wonderful. The assignments we get are incredible. These reading response menus that are challenging kids to look at books and think about what is the character's motivation, what do they learn throughout the course of the story, and then write about it. It's not always fun to do, but I think the end result is great. And she didn't touch on this, but the big thing that I have heard as a parent with a student coming home from this responsive classroom is that kids are able to debate things without calling out and shouting out. So those gestures she showed you of the so-so, yes, no, are really important. And the more other teachers can learn that and incorporate that would be really helpful as you do the principal search. I'd love to see a principal who supports this, because I think it does lead to an amazing classroom environment where kids feel heard. And they also then learn to respect their teacher. There's a great deal of respect in that classroom for that teacher, which is an amazing thing to have a bunch of 8-year-olds truly respect someone. So I'm sorry they left, but
Thank you.
Really
Thank
great
you.
presentation.
I know, Laura, I'm sure John will share that feedback because I think it's also the consensus of every year. A very impressive team. And I wasn't kidding when I said we accepted Mike's resignation with regret. That's a big loss, but I know you'll find someone to fill those shoes. A very, very impressive group. So, other public comment? Trish?
Trish Mulligan. I'm reacting to the educational aspect of the resolution. I think it directly relates to education. I think it shows our children that we're listening and that we understand that this is an issue that affects them and affects everyone in the world. So, and of course I guess everything is political, but I don't see this as political. I see this as geography, I see it as weather, I see it as society, social studies. I mean, there are whole societies, like in the Samoa, I have a girlfriend in Samoa. They're fighting to save their whole island and their culture. So I think this directly relates to education. And I think that if our school makes a stand, okay, it'll change the language, I agree with you. Okay, let's soften it, let's make it more general. That's fine, but at least say something, stand for something, because this is part of education.
Board, anybody? No more public comment. Thank you. Board member comment.
So
David.
this is my last statement on the issue of the climate change resolution. I spent 12 years on the board of managers of my Swarthmore College, my Quaker alma mater. And one of the points of pride of the board of managers at Swarthmore was that in my 12 years, we never took a vote because we worked hard to reach consensus on issues of that could have been very divisive. It would be my hope on this issue that a vote would be the last resort and that we would be able to find through some process, even where there are some disagreements. And I really understand Ray's point about precedent. It's a legitimate issue and has to be confronted. I think this warrants a statement by the board, but I don't want to relitigate that. What I'm simply saying is that it's my hope that in the great Quaker tradition, we can find consensus on this issue.
I just want to add that I think it, regardless of the language up front or wherever, I think it warrants actually being part of the curriculum and being part of, so the material parts, most material parts to me aren't what we state, but what we do. And to me, it's not just something where we should make a statement and say we think this is really important and then
But that's
go
a
on
piece
with
of
life.
it. But that's a piece of it, that's a step.
Right. Yeah,
That
no,
is
I understand.
credence.
I understand. I'm saying that I'm agreeing with the importance and even that like more specificity. So it doesn't have to be immediate in the statement, but that how are we going to get to, I don't know. I mean, if we're going to put solar panels on the roof, we shouldn't just put them on the roof and say, great, we put them. The kids should learn about what the solar panels mean and what that energy balance does and, be involved in it so that it's material. So,
Two things.
And I agree with your sentiment, David.
No, I've been very quiet on this whole thing mainly because I've just been listening to everybody. And I'm in agreement with a lot of things. In reflection to what you just said, Derek, I agree with you. It should be part of the curriculum. I want the kids learning about it. But just because we don't have that whole overarching plan yet isn't a reason to not take this first step. I think we're just looking at it as this is the first step. To stand for something, to say that we believe this is an issue for our children. And then I want to see further action. I want us to pursue it, however that, whatever, in whatever shape that takes.
Briefly, just, we had parents, part of the GSEF came to us, we had disagreement, we solved a problem, and we might have closed one door, opened up another, and I think that's a promising model for how to engage the board. Come to us, don't see us as an obstacle, see us as a facilitator rather than an obstacle. We can't do everything, we often can't do much. We operate in a box, and but we can facilitate and work with you to solving some of these things.
Would you welcome a conversation with some of the environmental education committee to resolve the wording?
Right, I would welcome collaboration with interested parties in the community on all things. Okay, I just want to say I'm going to miss Mike Williams. And I would say that John has been integral in facilitating a lot of this social emotional teamwork, and I appreciate his labors. And there's going to be time to celebrate him later down the line. And I think that's about it.
You know what, because of what you raised, I also want to add my gratitude to Sarah and Jen and for giving us such a great meeting and looking forward to working with you guys and to have you be so involved in this community and in this school is just wonderful, and I look forward to carrying on, and that was just the first step, but thank you so much.
Jill?
So, John Griffiths, I would like to recognize you. This is the last board meeting here that you'll be attending.
Is that right?
I thank you for...
You're welcome to anyone while you're still on the payroll.
Yeah.
One indelibly imprinted in my brain as well.
Oh, am I wrong about that?
I think we're gonna rope him back for something.
Oh, all right, well...
But go on.
You preemptively recognize him.
I'm so appreciative of your work with our children and our teachers and our staff and our parents and the Cub Scouts, blazing trails and orienteering, playing music for children. I'm really, really grateful for everything that you've done for the school and the people in it. Thank you so much.
Just one follow-up note on something I alluded to at our last meeting when I talked about traffic safety on Route 9. The folks at Chase and Associates, who we used on some school forest-related issues, have a subsidiary company that does traffic management studies. The fellow who runs that, I was introduced to the fellow who runs that, who was enormously helpful in just giving me a sort of primer level understanding of what's involved, who tabulates the data, where the most relevant data is with respect to highway safety on that stretch of Route 9 compared to other similar stretches of road in the state. And most of that data, according to him, resides with the New York State Department of Transportation in Region 8 up in Poughkeepsie, and that's relevant and encouraging because we have an actually pretty good relationship with them. Those are the folks who got the speed limit changed out in front of the school for the morning speed limit moved from 7 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. when all we really had to do was ask them. They were responsive, they were timely, it got done quickly. So I'm encouraged. I'm just letting you know I will then follow up with them, gather more information on this because it's one of my pet hobby horses at the moment. So, and that's all I've got. If there's nothing else, why don't we adjourn to resolve Board of Education, Garrison Union Free School District adjourns to executive session to discuss, what does it say, collective bargaining?
Collective bargaining.
Yeah, discuss collective bargaining. I would have gotten that on my own.
So moved.
Oh, so moved, second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions, no nays. Thank you all very much.
Yep.
Log in, I'll move you on down.